2020. This is our second year of this programming. It's a short format programming that we decided to try last year, and it was pretty successful, so we brought it back. I like it because it's real quick, and you get a lot of information and a wide variety of topics. We've got 4 great speakers for you today. They'll be talking to you. Each slide will advance every 20 seconds. So each presentation is 6 minutes and 40 seconds. So you're going to get a lot of information in a short period of time. And I would like to ask you to silence your cell phones. You don't have to turn them off, but if you could just silence them so that there's not any weird beeps or noises or theme songs that play in the middle of a presentation. And I would also encourage you, if you've not already done so, to vote for board members. There's a student director at large and 2 director at large candidates that are running. And this mic is giving me a little bit of feedback. Is that something that we can get? Oh, maybe it was me. Okay, it's all fixed now. It's perfect. I tested it for you. So without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first presenter. And I wish you a good day.
Garden variety is the title of this presentation. I've actually done several renditions of this idea of working with forms that are inspired by nature. This is one of the, Jerry Saltz was talking about people doing triangles. I do spheres. That's a joke. In 2014, I traveled to Australia and was really inspired by, maybe some of you have been there, Ayers Rock, Uluru. It's a national park in the western desert of Australia, and the nature there and the idea of the incredible survival skills of the indigenous people was inspiring too. Here's how I make the enclosed forms, having 2 maybe 20-inch diameter bowls, lip to lip. At first I wasn't putting a hole in them to glaze the inside, but I had a lot of cracking, so then it dawned on me, oh Ed, duh, you gotta glaze both sides inside and out. This I actually made before Australia, before my trip to Australia, and I sort of put it off to the side, and when I came back I thought, maybe this is a direction to pursue. I like the contrast of the organic and the geometric. These are about 16. After they're 20 inches when they're raw, and they shrink down maybe 10%. Bush tucker was one of the titles I gave this work a year and a half ago. Bush tucker is Australian slang for wild food. So in Australia you can take a bush tucker tour, which means you're shown in paths through the bush what was edible for the Aboriginal people, and then you can sit down to a table and eat it. But I was told it really tastes like shit, so I didn't pay the $250 for that bush tucker tour. Thank you very much. Also, I sometimes title my pieces after beaches where I lived on the Massachusetts coast. Nauset is out on the tip of Cape Cod. And sometimes when you beach comb, you see tangled things that wash up that are mysterious, at least when you're a kid. Sometimes a piece will come out of the kill and it'll just sort of speak to me and say, oh, title me Moon Race. I don't particularly, I'm not an astronomer, not an astronomy bug, but this piece just seemed like a meteor. And so there is a seam right along here, 2 halves joined there, and then I reorient them sometimes because maybe the glaze, and this is from Mike Taylor's kill in Holland, Michigan. That's why I titled it the way I did. I'm using Chino glazes because I think the variation that you can get from Chino, this is Malcolm Davis Chino. This sphere is just resting on this base here. Sometimes I fuse them together in the kiln. Sometimes I prop them up on shells or pieces of soft brick so that they don't stick to the shelf, and then I make the composition after they're fired. Sometimes I'll epoxy them together, sometimes not. Again, the dimensions are roughly 16 to 18 inches in diameter. And these tendril-like shapes here, I feel that they're similar to seaweed. Growing up again in Massachusetts, tangled seaweed would be on the shoreline after a storm. These are made by adding a coil to the perimeter of a large bat, maybe a 2-foot diameter bat, and then hollowing it out and cutting it and then draping it over some foam, some sponges or something to get it to be curvilinear. Ipswich is the name of a town in Massachusetts. I actually have never ever been to Ipswich, but I just always loved the sound of the word. The witches of, no, that was Eastwick. That was actually part of that film, that Jack Nicholson, Cher, Susan Sarandon film was filmed in my hometown, Cohasset, South Shore, Boston. So garden variety takes on two meanings for me. One is garden variety meaning commonplace, ordinary, but if you look closely at nature, it's not ordinary, it's never ordinary. But also just garden variety for me means variation in nature. Again, about 16, 17, 18 inches in height.
Is there a way to turn down the lights?
Good question. Then I stripped away any of those additions of clay in a few instances. Here's one with amazing crawling from that Malcolm Davis Chino glaze. Applied pretty thick and fired pretty hot. We fire our kills. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, at Western Michigan University, we fire our kills pretty hot. Probably the wood kill goes to cone 12. We fire about 3 cords of wood in 48 hours. And there's a blemish here because this thing rolled around in the firing and stuck to something. This is about 3.5 feet across here. This was built in the kill. These tendrils, this kelp went into the flue at the back of the kill, and they were propped so that with bricks and so forth, so it wouldn't hopefully sag and break. And this piece was also constructed in the kill, and these were just thickly glazed and laid on top of each other in a heap, kind of like the way you tumble stack a bisque, for instance. But these were glazed, raw glazed, and I just built them in the kill, and they stuck together. They're not, it'd be difficult to ship these somewhere, to crate them and ship them, because they might rattle loose. These tendrils here, these 2 pieces of twisted clay are just intersecting, or this sort of snake-like stack of, or coil of clay when it was soft. Resembling calamari. And then my last slide, this is the latest piece that I did, which I haven't quite figured out if I like it or not. These pieces were actually whole, and I split them in half. When they came out of the bisque, I thought, what the hell did I make these for? And so I broke them in half, glazed them, and fired them, some of them touching each other in the kill. And so some of these are fused together, others not. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now? You can, okay. All right. Can you still hear me this far back? Excellent. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Eleanor Heimbaugh. I'm the assistant professor of ceramics and sculpture at Bethany College in Lindsborg, Kansas. And today I'll be sharing with you my creative process and how I apply the vernacular to my work. So vernacular, we're talking about everyday objects that you are around, everyday environments that you're around, and how these things might be applied to your work. So hopefully you'll leave this presentation today being maybe a little bit more aware of the environment that you're surrounded by and how that impacts your work. So my artistic research, I'm interested in, it's a pseudoscientific investigation of 21st century American artifacts. I'm interested in what might be found and how they might be found and where they might be found. These were little souvenirs that I made for my thesis exhibition that viewers were invited to take with them. I also went to grad school in Hays, Kansas. I went to the Sternberg Museum quite a bit. Sternberg is known for their fish inside of a fish. I became very interested in their different display methods that they used. So we can see fossils displayed on shipping crates here. Something that I was really interested in was the darkroom that they had with minerals in it. So you would walk in, you'd pull the curtains apart, and then you hit the black light, and you were like immediately transformed into this different place, and you could see all the phosphorescence in the minerals. It was pretty cool. So I wanted to apply that into my work. So I started to use black lights on my work, and it showed a whole different layer. Went to undergrad in Topeka, Kansas. Used to ride my bike quite a bit. When I would ride up and down the alleys downtown, you would see like all this man-made infrastructure. It was so fascinating because you could see where windows used to be and doors used to be. And so I started to think about, well, how can I bring this into my work? And so I thought about how can I apply this? So I took something that we use every day, circuitry. You know, technology is so much a part of our everyday today. And so I decided to start embedding these types of objects into ceramic strata. And this strata is like, it's mechanically sliced. So also bringing the man-made in and thinking about how I can make the viewer maybe use their imagination a little bit more. So once you think of an idea, have you guys ever noticed this? Like you walk around, so I'm thinking about strata. Everything I see now is strata, like all the different layers, everywhere is strata. So this is a clay pit in North Carolina at a wood firing conference. This is where they would dig their clay. And it sort of made me think about, well, what is strata? Like where does it begin and where does it end? Does it end with the sky? Does it begin with the ground? And then I also thought about chronology and the passage of time. So this piece has glass bottles in the bottom and then plastic bottles on the next layer. So thinking about how can I visually represent time and the passage of time. And this is at Coronado Heights in Lindsborg, Kansas. There's all kinds of pathways there. It's been there for quite a while. It's pretty fun to walk through the pathways. It's also even more fun to look at the staircase you were on and realize that half of it's gone from underneath. And so this is so fascinating to me, how like sometimes we look at things and then there's this nice surprise like within, you know? I didn't expect there to not be any earth underneath. So one of my hypotheses is that all the heavy metals in our electronics now will be turned into geodes in the future. So this is a circuitry geode that if you break open, you find circuitry artifacts inside. So again, that little, you know, if you take the time to look, you might see something surprising. You have 20 seconds to find the spider. There's a spider in this image. I love to go on walks, and so I stopped to photograph all the plant life that was growing here. And then, whoa, there's a spider there. And it was really exciting because, you know, it's this element of play and discovery and allowing yourself that time, you know, to take the time to stop and have a look. So I was thinking about how I could apply that into my work. This is a 3D viewing wall. Viewers are invited to come up, take glasses, and look through the 3D glasses to find details in the work. So kind of like the experience I had with the spider, you know, taking the time to take a second look. I'm also the luckiest person in the world because I get to work with students every day. I always take them on as many adventures as I can. Any kind of an activity can be an adventure. You just have to have the right attitude about it. And it's always so cool to see how you can go into an environment. You can always, even if you've been there before, you can always find something new. Something new that inspires you or something that you didn't notice before. So this is the artifact garden. And you can walk along the boardwalk here and you can discover artifacts within. And viewers were invited to grab a flashlight and go along and discover artifacts. You can sort of see different layers of strata here, also incorporating the walls. And so another walking discovery. I saw this, you know, pop tab on the ground. It was like lightly snowing. And it's so fascinating to me how you can just see like these ordinary objects, but you know, they might have an extraordinary story. And my imagination always runs wild, thinking about like, what's the story behind this bottle tab? Like, who owned this? How did it end up here? You know, how did it end up all by itself in the snow? So on campus, I'm known as the artifact lady. Like, people bring me all their trash, and I make press molds from it. So these are all the theater cords from the theater department. And my building process is sort of like organized chaos. It's sort of like a method of collage. So sometimes I try to make a narrative with all the different objects that I'm using. I'm a Kansan, and Kansas has intense weather, and it's wonderful. Like, you might have a tornado, and snow, and winds, and rain, but there's something really beautiful and passionate about that, and I just think that's so incredible. Like, and it also pushes you outside of your comfort zone, and I think it's important that you get outside of your comfort zone. So I was thinking about how do I bring that into my work, and I mean, that means just go outside. And so I took an installation class, and I made gum artifacts, and I installed them out at this place called Castle Rock, where there's all these fossils and rocks in the ground, okay? People started walking on it. It was great. I couldn't even find them all afterwards. Like, they blended in so well. So I felt like that was successful, like I had mimicked nature. And I believe in like hard work and hard play. So you work hard, you play hard. So the carnival came to town this summer, and we went out, had a good time. It was so cool because it was like the whole place was transformed. There was all these bright lights, and people were laughing and like screaming on the rides and stuff. And it sort of transported you to another world. And so I was thinking about, again, how do I apply this to my work? This is really fun. So I made this piece that incorporated kaleidoscopes that you could hold up and look through and find artifacts through. And I think it's just important to remember that there is good in everything, in every place, and every person. You just have to take the time to look, and there's always something to be learned. So thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Ilana Crispi, and I'm going to be speaking about rebuilding the landscape and also how local materials can tell the story of a particular place. The work that we're looking at here was built from a mound of broken tiles from a closed factory in El Bruc, Spain, and it creates a kind of cocoon around your body. But it could also crash down at any moment. It also reframes the vista, so you can see the landscape through the holes, the gaps in the tiles, and also through the hole at the top. And I built it as high as I could reach. I climbed that artificial mountain of broken tiles and found shards that fit just right to puzzle the form together. And it is pretty precarious, but it did stay. This is a mural that was made nearby in Spain, and I collected local clays from around Montserrat Mountain and used the local clay as slip to paint designs referencing the landscape and the history of the village, of the local village, and the surrounding architecture nearby as well. And I painted murals on interior walls. You can see that the slip is slowly drying here and changing color. And I was looking at these traditional tile patterns and recreating them with unfired clay, bringing what was often on the floor back onto the wall in a much more ephemeral process. So it's a temporary intervention, and it alters the architecture and brings the materials from outside the landscape into this interior space. The mural reveals the evolution of pattern making as well, allowing for variation in density and form, and the outline here was created by the doorway in front of this wall. So there's no permanent transformation of the clay, the pattern's not fired, and I did similar pieces outside in the landscape. So this is painted right on the mountain wall, and it will stay there until the rock kind of crumbles or the storm comes and washes it away. And it's looking at how pattern changes based on context and using those natural landscape materials to create the structure of a particular place. This work is a rammed local earth block, and it's including debris that was found nearby from that closed tile factory. And I did similar pieces in the city in Barcelona, and with those rammed blocks, I used more industrial debris. So telling the story of a place from the found material and ramming it on site. This was part of a collaborative piece I did in Barcelona with another artist, and it was using that same traditional tile pattern, but also incorporating some interior Art Nouveau design from a home where we had both lived in Barcelona, and placing it outside in a much more urban landscape with the graffiti visible through, and it's since been painted over, but you can still see the pattern of that Art Nouveau floral design and the other triangles through it and diamonds through the graffiti that's on top because it has some dimension to it. You can also see the broken brick and crumbling. Back to the natural landscape, but an intervention that's a little bit more human. This is done in Long Valley, California, and it's made of a dried lake bed and paint chips. And I was examining natural patterns in the landscape and human interventions in nature. And the form and the void sit right side by side, and the artificial color illuminates the natural pattern but also disrupts it. I ram isolated elements of pattern into bricks. I used local and transported clays and soils and replaced them in the landscape, but not always in the source landscape and not always in a natural fashion, so that brick is just balanced there. So this particular brick was rammed in California, but placed in Mexico. And what you're looking at here is an undeveloped site in southern Baja, and I'm installing a form for ramming. So that rectangle is what I'm going to ram the chevron shape inside of. I'm exploring our relationship with landscape. How do we make impressions in the landscape? Who gets to make those alterations to the landscape? And this one here, this is what came from that form. It is pretty monumental, but it could very well come down in the next big storm. So it came from the patterns I was working with in Spain, but it's constructed using local soils from the landscape in Baja, and it has a very geometric structure, but it contradicts with that natural landscape. And here, that same form is placed on a much more sterile environment outside of context. And instead of shown in isolation as one part of pattern, it comes together to create another sort of form. So each form plays off of each other to create an expanded pattern, and the soils came from different sites and have different findings in them. This is the view of Bodecker Park from Glide Memorial in San Francisco, and I harvested honey from the rooftop here. It's part of a project that involved researching the history and the physical land of the Tenderloin neighborhood in San Francisco. I investigated geological surveys and historical records and oral histories from this inner city neighborhood. And this was an investigation into how we value, how we understand, and interact with a particular place. Here I'm sifting soil particles by size, doing materials research on site while Bodecker Park was under construction. There's actually very little accessible dirt in this neighborhood, so it's hard to find local soil. But I harvested local honey and tea that was grown in hidden gardens in the Tenderloin neighborhood, and I served them to people in vessels that was made from the dirt of the neighborhood as well. So it was glazed with the Tenderloin dirt, formed from the Tenderloin dirt, and people were invited to eat and drink from the local dirt of the neighborhood. I also displayed a sample of the Tenderloin soil unfired and unprocessed in the gallery window. So here value is determined by context and illumination, and visitors were invited to sit and gaze upon the dirt. Other specimens were on display as well. And there was a bench placed in front of this dirt that people could view from. And the bench itself was also made from the dirt of the neighborhood. The bench is a marker of place and importance. Vista spots often come with benches that direct the gaze and signify a vista place or a place of value. And most benches were removed from the Tenderloin neighborhood. They don't want people to sit and stay. And here is a Chinese version of the Tenderloin bench that was just done in Zhengzhou, China, as part of the Ceramic Biennale there. So the dirt from construction at the Henan Museum was used to create a local version of that Tenderloin project. And it's placed on display in front of the Tenderloin project. And ironically, the museum guards didn't actually let anybody sit on it. So it was another kind of contested terrain that developed there. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Hitomi Shibata. I am the potter in Seagrove, North Carolina. Me and my husband, Takuro Shibata, we are from Shigaraki, Japan. Shigaraki is one of the oldest pottery village in Japan, and also Seagrove is one of the biggest pottery village. Shigaraki is a well-known place for stoneware. They have lots of wonderful local clay and also long history for stoneware pottery. That's the one of the oldest jar in Momoyama period in 15th century. We really liked Shigaraki clay. And this is a wonderful international art center in Shigaraki, which name is Shigaraki Ceramic Cultural Park. That's the very good place to meet ceramic artists and make friends. And we found very good friends, so it made us to come to United States. And this is our kiln home, Seagrove. Shigaraki style, large kiln, and it takes 4 to 5 days to complete wood firing. We built in 2009, and it took 1 year to finish. And this is a second chamber that we add behind the anagama, and we can make pots and tablewares and fire by this kiln, and we add 4 to 5 rock salt at the end of the firing. And recently, we made another new kiln home. Our good friend and wonderful Estonian kiln builder, Andres Alik, we built this kiln together in 2015. And this is the clay in Seagrove. Seagrove is also a very well-known place for wild clays for potters. My husband, Takuro, researched many wild clays in that area, and also he started making North Carolina local clay for area potters. This is my studio. I have 2 small children, and when they go to work, I make pots in my small studio space. I also use North Carolina local clay and make functional pottery for my customers. And I'm gonna show some of my work made in my studio and fired in by our wood kiln. I use local clay and also use ash glaze that I make from wood stove, wood ash from wood stove, and also wood kiln. Thank you. This jar is made of 100% pure clay, Mitchfield clay, and natural rocks, and a little bit other local clay. It has a big crack, but I really liked it. That's the beauty of the nature, that I believe. And fired by anagama for 4 days. I also like to make teapots because I drink a lot of Japanese green tea. Teapots are most difficult pottery for potters because you have to make many parts and assemble, but it's fun and good training sometimes and useful. I also really like making a large plate on the wheel. This is like 22-inch wide and North Carolina local clay, Shino glaze, wood fired. And this is my husband, Takuro Shibata. He's a wonderful potter, and also he knows about materials. So he's the director of Starworks Ceramics and research local clay and give technical support for local potters. He make functional pottery. This is Unomi and North Carolina local clay, 100% pure clay for white slip and wood fired. He makes a triangle large jar. He said he just want to make triangle large jar, not round, just triangle. So this red color is from 100% pure clay from North Carolina. This is also another triangle large jar, wood fired. This is Takuro's slab work, and it's very interesting because this clay is 100% pure clay from the ground. No mesh or no screen, just 100% digging from the ground and unglazed. This is also another pure clay in Seagrove area. The dots on the surface is a wedding mark, and fired by our friend David Stempfur's Anagama in 2015, I think. And this is our cat. When we came to Seagrove, we had 3 suitcases and 1 cat. That was all our property. And he's stretching on our Anagama. If you have a chance to come to Seagrove area, please come. Please check North Carolina Pottery Center website and also starworksnc.org. There are so many informations about wonderful potters and good clay. Thank you so much.